Children and youth representatives, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that my message finds you all healthy and in good spirits. Of course, I would have preferred to meet you in person today, but I am happy and honored that I can at least contribute virtually to this very important event. I thank my colleagues from Save the Children, one of my office's oldest and strongest partners, and the government of Sweden for hosting the child participation webinar on children and armed conflict. I vividly remember our engagement last year in October during the Pan-African Conference on Children and Armed Conflict, which resulted in the Children's Call to Action. I commend you for organizing this follow-up activity despite the challenging circumstances. It is important that we keep the conversation going. I also thank the representative of the government of Mali and the representative from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child for their contributions today. My special thanks, however, goes to our youngest participants. I am always encouraged when children and young people speak up about their experiences and share their thoughts on how to tackle the problems they face. These are difficult and uncertain times, especially for children and especially for those growing up in conflict-affected countries. So it is all the more important to hear from you. I encourage you to keep raising your voices always. This month, we celebrate two important anniversaries: the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and the 31st anniversary of the adoption of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. These two important international and regional instruments are based on the profound idea that children hold rights and that it is the obligation of states to ensure that these rights are upheld and promoted and that children are protected. We have come a long way since then, and I appreciate Africa's strong engagement on protecting children in conflict, which, by the way, played a key role in the creation of my mandate about 25 years ago. As Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, it is my job to combat violence against children in armed conflict and to find the best ways to protect them, including through the prevention of violations against children used and abused in, for, and by armed conflict. In this task, we need to work locally, nationally, regionally, and globally because it takes a world to save the children. I am committed to our shared vision of a future where all children can grow up in peace and are able to develop fully and enjoy their rights. Unfortunately, this vision is not a reality yet. There are millions of children that currently live amidst conflict. Children are the primary victims of armed conflict, and every year tens of thousands of them are killed, maimed, abducted, recruited, used, abused, or have their rights violated in other ways. The United Nations verified 25,000 violations against children in 2019 alone. Children living in war are deprived of their childhood. Often they are also deprived of their future. This happens across the globe, not only in Africa, but allow me to focus on the situations you will be discussing today. In Somalia, we continue to see high numbers of grave violations against children committed by all parties to conflict. I am especially worried about the staggering numbers of child abductions and the recruitment and use of children committed by Al-Shabaab. It is also concerning that children are often detained for their actual or alleged association with armed groups, even though they should primarily be treated as victims. Rape and sexual violence are also a growing violation in Somalia. In South Sudan, the situation has improved, which can be attributed to the peace process and steps taken by the parties to end and prevent grave violations against children following the engagement they had with the United Nations. However, all 6 grave violations continue to be committed, and the conflict has had long-lasting and devastating effects on children. We have to put an end to this and provide children with long-term assistance and services, including reintegration and rehabilitation programs that are both sustainable and comprehensive. In Sudan, children have been deeply affected by years of armed conflict and grave violations committed against them. These continue, but the Juba peace process is presenting a good opportunity to sustainably address the grievances of children. It is important to ensure that the rights and needs of children are taken into account in this process and in any future peace talks. In addition, the perpetrators of violations need to be held accountable, and victims need to receive justice and redress. And in Mali, although there have been continued efforts to strengthen the protection of children, I am concerned by ongoing violations, including an unprecedented number of child casualties that the United Nations verified last year. At the same time, cross-border dynamics of conflict and intercommunal violence in the Sahel region are very worrying, and we urgently need to address the situation of children affected by this. Peace remains the best way to protect children, and I urge all those involved in peace processes to consult and use the technical guidelines for mediators to include child language at the heart of a peace process in all their endeavors. This year, COVID-19 has added to the despair of conflict-affected children. Restrictive measures, including school closures and the socio-economic impact of the pandemic, have left children and their families even more vulnerable. In many places, children's access to healthcare, education, and social services has been reduced even further. And the situation for children living in refugee and internally displaced persons camps and children in detention is especially dire. At the same time, there are fewer opportunities for child protection actors to reach children in need. I am particularly worried about continuing attacks on schools and hospitals, especially when I think about the fragile state of health systems in conflict-affected countries and the heavy burden the pandemic places on them. We have also observed that armed groups and forces take advantage of COVID-19 restrictions and use facilities that have been closed for military purposes, which is unacceptable. Last year's Children's Call to Action included a strong appeal to protect schools and hospitals and to ensure that children have access to good education and health care, including mental health support. I believe that this call has become even more relevant and urgent this year, and I wholeheartedly echo it. Before I close, I would like to underline that boys and girls affected by armed conflict are not only victims. They are key actors in breaking cycles of violence, ensuring that peace is sustainable and bringing stability to their communities. It is essential that children and young people participate meaningfully in peace initiatives and are able to take their rightful place as community actors and citizens. This is also what my initiative Act to Protect Children Affected by Conflict is about. It aims to empower everyone, including young people, to make a positive difference in the lives of boys and girls affected by conflict. All of you have an important role to play, and so I ask you, please take action. I wish you a very successful event today, and I look forward to receiving the recommendations that result from your discussions. Thank you, and be safe.